0, 1, 2, 3. Let's get started.
Okay, so today I wanted to talk about how to tune your gun for suppression. I realized that I have a million videos on my channel of how to make your own suppressor, but I don't have a video that tells you how to make your gun run reliably once you're running suppressed. So the reason why this is important is because when you put a suppressor on your gun, you're essentially putting a big restriction on the end of the barrel. Okay, so instead of those gases being able to flow freely out of the end, they're being trapped and redirected. Okay, and when you're those gases have to go somewhere. So in the case of shooting, they're all coming back towards you, right? Which means that you're going to experience more felt recoil, more gas in the face, the gun's going to run dirtier, things like that. Now, there are exceptions to this, obviously, because nowadays we have these fancy flow-through cans and cans that are supposedly, you know, low or no back pressure and stuff like that. But we're not going to be talking about that today. We're talking just strictly about regular suppressors like the ones you've seen a million times, the ones that, you know, just trap and restrict all of the gas, not the ones that flow through. So, like, let me start off with just an example. My AR-15 is a pretty basic, you know, it's not fancy. I bought it on a Black Friday sale for like $400 or $500, and it came with stuff. So it wasn't $400 or $500 by itself. It's a pretty cheap AR-15. And when I first started shooting suppressed, I noticed that I was getting a lot of light strikes because I was just barely like a hair out of battery. Okay, so I looked into what could be causing that, and I realized that my gun came from the factory with an H1 buffer. Now, the H1 refers to its weight, and the buffer is the thing that in that tube that's essentially counteracting the recoil from the bolt. So when you fire your gun, those gases send the bullet down the barrel, but then that gas is also used in order to run the mechanism of the gun itself. So the gas comes back through the tube, and in the case of an AR-15, hits the key on the bolt carrier group and sends the bolt backwards, right? Now, the bolt travels back against the, you know, the buffer spring and the weight, and then the spring goes back forward and pushes it into battery. If you have a very light buffer weight and just a regular bolt carrier group, when you start running suppressed, that bolt is just going to be slamming super hard against the back of the gun, okay? And one, that's not great for your bolt, but two, it can also cause issues like I was describing where you're getting light strikes. So by increasing the weight, in my case, I increased it to an H3, and that's generally a pretty good rule of thumb, is that if you're running suppressed, you're gonna wanna go at the minimum to an H2, but probably an H3, because that's gonna help slow the bolt down, and it's also gonna help get the bolt back fully into battery. So just the first step one, if you're running suppressed and you're dealing with just like a basic AR and you don't have an adjustable gas block or anything like that, start with your buffer weight. Okay, what I did is, since I had an H1 already, I bought an H4, and I took them both apart and I put the weights together in such a way that gave me an H3, because an H1 has all steel slugs, an H4 has all tungsten slugs. And you can make whichever you need just by switching out the slugs. So if I have an H1, it's all steel. An H2 is 1 tungsten and the rest steel. An H3 is 2 tungsten and the rest steel. And an H4 is all tungsten, okay? So that's, if you don't have anything adjustable, if the only thing that you can change is your buffer weight, start there. You could also potentially adjust your buffer spring, but you know, like I said, if that's all you can adjust, start by adjusting that. It will make somewhat of a difference. But the next big thing, and this is something that you're going to want to look into if you are going to be running a lot of suppression, is you're going to want a gas block, okay? Because while it is going to alleviate some of your problems to just adjust the buffer weight, that's not going to fix everything, and that's not going to help you at all when it comes to running subsonics and just changing different types of ammo in general. If you want the option to be able to run any type of ammo, for the most part, you're going to need a gas block that is adjustable. Now this one is kind of a nicer option here. I can adjust it just on the fly by turning this. A lot of the gas blocks out there, especially on the more affordable end of the spectrum, you're gonna have to use a tool to adjust them, and that's fine. You can also get a bolt itself, a bolt carrier group that has an adjustable key for the gas. So there are options to add gas adjustability to your system, but if you're gonna run suppressed, this is the #1 best thing that you can do as far as reliability goes. Because if I wanted to run, let's say, subsonics, okay? That subsonic round is gonna have much less powder, which means there's going to be much less gas. So the gun, if I don't have an adjustable gas block, has a much higher potential of not being able to fully cycle and function correctly because there's not enough gas to run the mechanism, okay? So in a gun like this, where it has an adjustable gas block, I can fully close off the gas, so all the gas is trapped in the system, and it allows the gun to function more reliably with subsonic rounds. Now, when you're getting into subsonics, obviously, sometimes you can, even with an adjustable gas block, you can find some types of ammo that just won't cycle no matter what you do, because like especially with 300 blackout, you know, there's rounds out there that are super freaking big and heavy, and they just don't have a ton of powder behind them. But that's a case-by-case basis. For the most part, if you got an adjustable gas block, you'll be able to run basically everything. But the real point here is that you can go from subs to supers with just a small adjustment, okay? Because if you're running supersonic rounds, there's a lot of extra gas in the system that you want to be able to get rid of, right? So you turn your gas key, and it'll be different for yours. For mine, you know, it's one way or the other to either increase or decrease the gas. But if you're running supers, you're gonna wanna decrease the amount of gas that's in the system. You're gonna wanna vent some of that gas, essentially. And then if you're running subs, like I said, you're gonna want all that gas to be trapped and held in, right? The other nice thing about having an adjustable gas block, even if you're not running suppressed, is that you can change the felt recoil, right? So like, let's say I'm running supersonic rounds, let's say I'm not even running a suppressor, I can turn the gas down, right? So it's venting off some of that gas, and it will change the felt recoil. It will lower the amount of recoil that I feel. So there are a ton of benefits to running a gas block, an adjustable gas block. But in general, like I said, if you're running suppressed, you're definitely gonna wanna buy one of these. Whether it's this type of gas block that's up here and adjustable, either, you know, by hand or with a tool, or whether it's, you know, some sort of adjustable bolt carrier group thing or whatever. But either way, you're gonna want that adjustability, okay? Not all guns are gonna have that option. Like the P90 that I've got, there's no option for me to run, you know, it doesn't even use the same type of system, so I can't put an adjustable gas block on it. But, you know, usually with guns that aren't adjustable in that way, oftentimes, you know, suppression was a consideration from the factory. So like with the case of the P90, it might not have any sort of adjustability, but it also still runs fairly reliably suppressed, even if you're running subs and supers. So it's something that they took into consideration from the factory. Now that's not gonna be the case every time, right? Not every gun is gonna be designed to run suppressed and unsuppressed. But, you know, like I said, sometimes it's an option, sometimes it's not. It really just depends on what kind of gun you're running. The last thing that I'm going to talk about real quick is handguns, because this is where it gets a little bit more complicated because you got to buy more parts, okay? Well, I guess technically you're potentially buying more parts for your AR if you don't already have an adjustable gas block, but with a pistol, the suppressor itself is going to need an extra part. It's called a booster, or a Nielsen device. Call it whatever you want it. Some people call it a Nielsen, some people call it a booster. It doesn't matter. The point is, when you're running a pistol, the amount of weight that's hanging off the barrel, most pistols, you know, have the Browning action style where the barrel itself is moving. Actually, I should probably drop this out and make sure. Yeah. So the barrel, I don't know if you can even see it, but when you're fully back, the barrel, you can probably tell, is up quite a bit, right? Now, if you stop that barrel from being able to move, the gun's not gonna cycle properly. And it doesn't take a lot in order to stop this gun from cycling properly and functioning the way that it should. So just the weight of a suppressor hanging off the end is usually enough to make a gun like this not cycle correctly. You'll just get one shot and then you gotta manually cycle another round. But with a booster or a Nielsen device, it will help to compensate for that weight by increasing the amount of, essentially increasing the amount of recoil in order to assist in getting, you know, the next round chambered. So if you're running suppression on a pistol, I would say most of the time you're gonna need a booster or a Nielsen device. It's not 100%. Like my 1911, for instance, doesn't require a booster to run reliably with suppression. It does, you do need to oil the heck out of it. That's one quirk with the 1911s. Like they'll work without a booster, but if it's dry, it's not gonna work. Like it'll shoot just fine without being super oiled up. But once I put a suppressor on there, it needs to be way over oiled, but it'll work, okay? But with my Glock, this thing will not, it doesn't matter how light of a suppressor I use on this thing, it's not gonna function correctly. So for this Glock to function normally with a suppressor, it would require a Nielsen device. And I don't even have a Nielsen device right now, and so I don't have any way of suppressing this, which makes these threads on the end of the barrel kind of useless. But either way, it's just something to take into consideration when you're shooting suppressed with pistols. It's a little bit different than shooting suppressed with rifles, and it makes moving the suppressor from one host to the next, it adds an extra step, basically. So I think that's it. I think I covered the basics. I mean, like I said, this isn't supposed to be like a super in-depth video. This is just to give you an idea of like, okay, I fired my Glock and it didn't cycle, what's going on? Well, you need a booster, you know. Oh, I fired my AR and I'm getting light strikes. Okay, increase your buffer weight. But yeah, I think that's about it. I just wanted to go over this real quick. And if you liked the video, if this was helpful to you in any way, please like and subscribe or share the video. You guys can follow me on Patreon under the same name, Will Print for Food. I also post over on Patreon all of the files that I print. I don't charge anything. Like, you don't even have to be a member of my Patreon to have access to those files. It's all publicly available. So the files for the suppressors or the lowers or any of the gun related stuff that I talk about. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.